Hello. Why are you all here? Oh dear, I've got 3 talks and a pub quiz to do today, and I have woken up with the worst case of imposter syndrome that I've ever had, and I'm just, why are you come to listen to me? I don't... So, yes, this talk is all about why I'm not leaving .NET, because I thought that would make a nice change. I'm sure everyone's read one of those blog posts and various people's reasons, and I just thought I'd take a look at those reasons and argue with them and possibly say mean things about other platforms and languages while I'm at it, because that's always fun. So, we've been doing .NET, well, I've been doing .NET programming now for 17 years. I got the first beta of C# and the CSC back when you had to actually edit the code in Notepad in the year 2000, just towards the end of the year 2000. This was Microsoft in the year 2000. Developers. He looks like he'd be more at home in a Star Trek franchise, doesn't he? He should be behind the bar in some horrible alien hovel somewhere. But no, Microsoft in 2000, they were kind of they were just the big software company. They did everything. They were being sued for antitrust by people who made different browsers. And if you were a Microsoft developer in the year 2000, then you were either using C++, or you were using Visual Basic 6, or you were using Visual Basic 6, but telling everybody you were using C++. Like me. Because I tried to write COM components in C++. Has anyone ever tried to write COM components or ActiveX controls in C++? Okay, keep your hand up if you gave up and just went over to VB6 to do it. Because, seriously, COM in C++, not easy. I interface, I unknown 2, because they had to change the I unknown interface. Yeah. And then at the end of 2000, they came out with C#. And I downloaded the beta of C# because they said, it's a bit like Java. It runs on a virtual machine and it's bytecode and you can run it on any platform. And I went, oh, yay, I'll be able to write code for... Are there other platforms? Because in 2000, there really weren't other platforms. Nobody was buying Macs anymore. Unix was kind of, yeah, okay, still there in the banks and that sort of thing. It was a good thing to run Oracle on at that point. But, you know, so C# came along and I downloaded it and I was editing code in Notepad. And it was actually because of that, because I got C# and I was trying to edit code in Notepad, and Notepad sucks for editing code. And I found out that someone had made a new version of VI called Vim. And so I downloaded Vim because I started programming in 1989 professionally, and I turned up to the first day on the job and they sat me down and said, write this piece of code. And I said, what editor do I use? And they said VI. And so I VI file name and then started pressing keys and nothing happened. And I told someone this, that because these days I install the Vim keyboard shortcuts into anything that I use, and I said my muscle memory, because they were going, oh, you hipster, for using the Vim keyboard shortcuts, and I went, it's no, seriously, because when I started in 1989, VI was the only thing there was. I mean, double hipster, liked it before it was cool. Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, C#, when I got that first beta, you couldn't even do anything with it. You could create a single C# file. There was no MS build attached to it or anything like that. And you just did CSC to build your little console application. The first thing I wrote actually used reflection to go over all the public classes and types and methods and properties in all the assemblies in the base class library, and got myself a big printout of the entire .NET framework so I could start staring at it and just going, oh, I wonder what those will do when I finally get my hands on this. And then when I finally did get my hands on it, when they released Visual Studio .NET in 2001, It was Windows Forms and Web Forms. And the thing is, now we look back, I mean, Web Forms, okay, that was just a bad idea. I'm not going to say anything good about Web Forms. It was basically Microsoft going, pretend you're not writing a web application, and we'll do all the clever tricks to make it look like you have written a web application, but it'll be terrible with view state and everything else. Any Web Forms guys in the room? Yeah, still like it, still sort of, no, okay, good. Thought I was going to get some red cards there. But Windows Forms, actually, I don't say mean things about Windows Forms, because at the time, building desktop applications for Microsoft Windows was an absolute car crash. Visual Basic 6 was not great, and Visual C++, if you wanted to build a desktop application, you had to actually code the layout of all your dialogues and everything else. And on the Java side of things, you had Swing and various, but they all looked like absolute crap. And so Windows Forms came along, and it was amazing. You could write Windows applications that looked like Windows applications, that had all the same style as Microsoft's applications and everything else. And so, yeah, .NET came along, and it fixed this problem. And C# came along, and it was sort of similar to C++. It made you feel like you were using a proper grown-up language, and not one where the first letter of it stood for beginner. And you could say, yes, I'm a proper programmer, and I'm writing proper code. And then they followed that up with Windows Mobile, because Microsoft invented the smartphone. Yes, they did. And so you could do Windows Mobile code. And then people started making new languages that you could use on the CLR. And, you know, because Microsoft said, anything can compile to bytecode. So we had A# and Boo and C# and Cobra and Component Pascal. Did anyone ever use that? No, obviously. And and we had all the Iron languages as well. You had Iron Lisp and Iron Python and Iron Ruby and Iron Scheme. Iron Scheme still works. If you want to write Scheme code, you can still write it and run it using Iron Scheme on the dynamic language runtime. And then you've got various other languages. I used to use SQL Windows, that one down at the bottom there. That was Gupta SQL Windows. In the mid-90s, I was using that to build database client-server applications. And they made it so that you could take your SQL Windows code and compile it to the CLR bytecode. And so there was all this exciting stuff. And then this popped up, F#. And you could write functions. This was around the time of .NET 2.0. And so I had an argument on Twitter recently where I said, I've tried F# and I don't like it. Because I was bored that day and I felt like having a massive argument with hundreds of people on Twitter. And it worked. But actually it's not true. So I have tried F# and I don't particularly enjoy writing code in F#. I don't see why people get so excited about it. But I love F# as a language. I absolutely adore it, because anything good that happens in F# will eventually get into C#. So F# had async, F# had pattern matching. F# is the reason that in .NET we have proper reified generics. So we can create a generic type and then at runtime, using reflection, create a concrete type of that generic type on the fly. At runtime, dynamically is the word I'm looking for. Java can't do that. Java fakes its generics, and if you haven't declared the thing at compile time, then it's never going to happen. It's like C# template library. But no, F# came along, and F# is good for certain. Do you know the only thing I don't like about it is you have to have the files in the right order in the project. That's the thing that winds me up about F#. Apart from that, it's fine. Oh, and white space. I don't like significant white space. I don't like bugs that you can't see. No. So F# came along, and then So it was kind of going well, but then at some point in the 2000s, Linux started to become important again, and people were kind of going, oh, look, the LAMP stack, Linux and Apache and MySQL and PHP, and web servers are starting to run Linux all over the place. And so you're starting to think, oh, maybe it would be good if .NET did work on Linux, but Microsoft weren't going to do that because Microsoft said open source is a cancer and Linux must be destroyed, and will nobody rid me of this turbulent Linux? And so it looked like we were never going to get to run .NET on Linux. And then Miguel de Icaza comes along and goes, Miguel de Icaza is like one of my top 5 programming heroes. This is a guy who went, I really like C#. I think C# is a great language. I wish I could use C# on Linux, on the GNOME project, which is what I do for a living. So I'm going to port the entire .NET framework and C# over so it will run on Linux. Who does that? Serious? Who goes, this is just like an entire division of Microsoft has built this thing. I'm going to re-implement it over here by myself. Oh, anyone want to help? This is taking longer than I thought. And you know, Mono has always had its problems, and some of the bits of it don't work as well as other bits, but you could write a complete ASP.NET application and run it on Mono on top of the mod Apache plugin and everything else, and you could get your ASP.NET Web Forms application working on a Linux box, which is just incredibly impressive. But around this time, in the sort of late 2000s, what do you call them? Naughties? There's no. This was on XKCD the other day. There's no word for the first decade of this, or this decade actually. We don't know, the teenies or something. God, 3 years' time, it's going to get so much easier. But yes, so at around the same time as someone loves .NET so much that they have ported it and got it working on Linux, you started to see these blog posts going, "Why I'm leaving .NET." And it's just kind of, I never understood the point of these blog posts. It's like, just go. Nobody cares why you're leaving, you know, unless you're Anders Halesberg or John Skeet or someone. If John Skeet goes, "Why I hate C# now," then I'll read that blog post, you know. But yes, people will go, "I'm leaving .NET," and they started out leaving .NET to go to Ruby. Because Ruby was like this big new thing, and actually it wasn't particularly Ruby, because Ruby's this language that's supposed to make programmers happy, because you can say unless or something. I don't know, but it was Rails. And people were going, "Oh, I'm building web applications. I want to use the model view controller pattern, and like in this Rails framework that we've got over here. So I'm going to build my web application just by typing console commands, and then I'm going to put it into production. And then I'm going to go, oh no, someone's asked for a feature. I'm going to go and try and implement that feature in a way that Rails developers never thought of," which is when that happens. Rails is great for creating CRUD applications and shipping them. As soon as you want to do something a little bit different, it was brilliant around 2.3, I think, is the point. I saw something recently that said in Rails 5, as soon as you create an active controller, it's got something like 160 base classes and mix-ins included in it that the Ruby runtime has got to load and compile and JIT and everything else before it can actually start serving your code. So yes. So there's people going off to write Rails code instead, and good luck to them, and fair enough. And then something else came along that made people suddenly start using something else, and that was this. Apple released the iPhone in 2006, and actually the original, sort of the first year of the iPhone, they said, if you want to write apps for the iPhone, write web applications and just get people to access them through the browser. That's how you do that thing. And you're kind of like, no, we want an SDK. And so they released an SDK, and suddenly everybody had to go and learn Objective-C. Has anyone done Objective-C programming? Did you enjoy it? Who said yes? Did you really, though? It is different, I'll give you that, yes. I'll tell you how you make Objective-C. You take the best bits of Smalltalk and the best bits of C++, and you throw them away. What you have left is Objective-C. And I am obviously right, because Apple have abandoned it and created Swift instead. And Swift is basically C# with a little bit of Ruby and a little bit of some other stuff as well. But, you know. Yes, and I don't do that either. So people are going off and doing Objective-C, and then people are saying, I'm leaving .NET because I'm going to go and do Objective-C because I'm going to put my app on the App Store and make millions of 30 cents times something and whatever. And so that was fine. And then Node.js came along, and it was basically saying to people who'd been doing jQuery on the front end, you can write back-end code. And lots of people got very excited about Node.js and NPM and went off to build applications with that. And I don't know. I can't really fault those people. Node.js is fine. Used to be kind of really, really fast. Doesn't look quite so fast these days on Tech Empower. But, yeah, if you like that sort of thing. The most recent thing that I've seen people write I'm leaving .NET posts about is Go. And, yeah. So Go, again, I'm kind of conflicted. Go's a bit like Python, and it's got some good things about it, but it's really missing a whole bunch of features. It's very difficult to, there's no generics. It's very difficult to do functional style programming in Go because you can't write a map function that takes a generic type, and that's kind of important when you're writing map functions or reduce functions or that sort of thing. Basically, Go is what you would get if a language designer got frozen into a glacier in the 1970s and then thawed out in the year 2010 and said, make a new programming language without any of the last 40 years of experience. It's great for writing systems code because with systems code you're not particularly fussed about generics and all this sort of stuff, and you've got kind of you can do maps over lists of int and that sort of thing. The big thing that people always talk about with Go is the fact that it's natively compiled, and you can just create a single executable binary and then ship it and run it on any machine. So this is the only demo in this entire talk, but where am I? Not you, I want a different one. So I have an application here that I have written in, if I can CD down enough directories. So I'm going to open this up here. So here is my .NET application. This is a .NET Core application with my program.cs file here. Just a standard, lots of write lines and so forth. And I have added a couple of targets to my CS proj file. So I've got my MS Build SDKs path, so that sort of hooks me up with the MS Build pipeline. This is .NET Core 2.0, Preview 1. And then I've got this import project here, ILC path Microsoft.NET Core.native.targets. Where I got that from was I went to GitHub, .NET Core RT. So Core RT is an alternative .NET runtime. So it's an alternative to the CLR. And it's optimized for ahead-of-time compilation. So all the libraries to do with reflection and so forth have been rewritten, and lots of the low-level primitives have been rewritten, and they're optimized so that this can be compiled to native machine code ahead of time. And if you go to this repository and go into documentation and go to how to build and run IL compiler in console shell prompt.md. You can read the instructions here, and it's got instructions for Windows and Unix. And once you've done that and you set an ILC path environment variable to point to the place where you compiled that code to, you can, I'm going to just remove my bin directory so that you can, what do you mean busy? Oh. Okay. So, and I'm going to do .NET build -c release /t colon, so this is like an MS build parameter that's going to get passed through to MS build, link native. Okay. The warning that you get there is just, that's always going to happen apparently. It's complaining that I've already imported something because it was imported in something else that I imported, and so it kind of loops around on itself and so forth. But that has created, if I go into my bin directory and then into x64, because that now becomes important, this only works for 64-bit at the moment, and then I go into release, and then I go into Netcore App 2. So here I've got my .NET DLL that I have compiled, because when you compile a .NET Core executable, even if in your CSproj file it says target is an exe, it will create a DLL because it has to be run with the .NET command line tool. So it's a bit like mono on Linux. You had to say mono thingy.dll. So if I say .NET hello-rt.dll, that runs that code like that. But if I go into native, so just very quickly, so you can see here the hello-rt.dll is 11K. So that's my .NET application. That's bytecode to be loaded into the CLR and run. Okay, but whoever I send that to has got to have the .NET executable to launch that properly, and they have to have .NET, the 2.0 Preview 1 SDK and everything installed. So if I cd into native and do dir, let's just clear, you can see we have an hello-rt.exe, and you can see that it is 6.1 gigabytes. No, it's not. It's 6.1 megabytes, which is quite big. And you might think that's, considering that all that does is this, if I do hello-rt.exe, and then we'll shrink that down like that. Can you see what that is? Just about? It's my Twitter avatar. But yes, that is the complete, that's the runtime and the garbage collector and everything all bundled in, all the required libraries, the system DLL, MS Core lib, the whole lot, all compiled into a statically linked native executable. You can take that exe and give it to anybody running a 64-bit version of Windows, regardless of what they've got installed, and they will be able to run it. Okay? The really fun thing is, I'm not going to demonstrate this because it's kind of not particularly visual, but I've got the Windows subsystem for Linux installed on this laptop, which is running Ubuntu, effectively. And I got the .NET tooling for Linux installed, and I went through all the instructions in this web page to build and run the IL compiler for Linux. And so on my Windows box, using the Ubuntu bash prompt from the Windows subsystem for Linux that I got from the Windows store, I can go through the same process with the same code, and it produces a Linux x64 executable that I can then pick up and give to anybody running any 64-bit version of Linux, and they'll be able to run it as well. For some reason, when I do that, a Hello World application is about 7 megabytes. But still, you know, and the point is that, well, there's 2 points. One, it starts up, well, there's 3 points. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition. Nice red uniforms. So the first point, people don't need .NET installed. They can just run the executable file and they're done. 2, it starts up really fast. If you're building a command line tool or a service that you want to just start up, do something, and then shut down again really quickly, the ahead of time compiled, there's no jitting involved, there's no loading stuff from all different places on the disk. It just loads, runs, and exits really, really quickly. And the third one, and we're not seeing this just yet, but we will start to see this, is the step between when it produces the IL code and when it produces the native code. Currently, they're actually using RyuJIT. They're using the JIT compiler from .NET Core to produce the native code ahead of time. But they will be able to plug in different compilers, and they're working on one that produces C++ code as a kind of proof of concept, but one that uses the LLVM native compiler and linker. And that will be able to do a lot more optimization of your code. So a JIT compiler has to do a trade-off between producing fast machine code and producing machine code fast, okay? Because it doesn't want to sit there and go, what's the best way to optimize this loop and so forth? Whereas if you can say, right, you've got like 5 minutes to do this build, I don't really care how long it takes you, it can produce the most optimal machine code that you could possibly have. And so this Core RT project is going to end up being able to do that. And was anyone in the David Fowler and John Galloway's talk last night about ASP.NET Futures roadmap stuff? Because one of their targets is to get ASP.NET Core to work with Core RT. So you'll be able to write your ASP.NET Core application with controllers and views and everything else, and then compile it using that .NET build/t link native and come out with a single little executable file that's about 10 megabytes maybe, and then put that into an Alpine Docker image, which is 5 megabytes. So then you've got a 15 megabyte Docker image, which is your complete web application. And you'll just be able to ship that, and it'll be insanely fast because it'll have been through an optimizing compiler that's just produced the best machine code it possibly could. I'm quite excited about that. Is anybody else excited about that? No, it's just me. I've just bored you rigid for 5 minutes. Well, never mind. It made me happy, and that's the important thing. So, yes. And we get all of that with generics and lambdas and async and await and all that cool stuff. So, yes, to go. Although I do like defer. I have to say, defer's nice. Someone should put defer into C#. No, C#6, you kind of start to take it for granted after a while, and then you have to go and write code in other languages, and you remember all the stuff that you've got in C# that's really good. Because I think a lot of people are still using C#6 because 7's still quite new, and people are still working with Visual Studio 2013 and 2015, and so but even in C#6 you've got generics, which you've had since 2.0. You've got link and lambdas and extension methods. You've got dynamic. Does anyone actually use dynamic for anything? No. Yeah, any simple data people in the room? Yes, sorry about that. We got async and await, and I've started taking that completely for granted now. And we've got that in TypeScript as well now, so that's good. And these days we have Roslyn, so they can add new features really quickly. We've got exception filters, so you can say catch this exception when something is true, so you can catch an HTTP exception when the status code is more than 500 or something. And then we've got C#7, which is the kind of current version, and you can start doing stuff with this. We've got algebraic data types in there. We've got pattern matching on types, but it's a damn sight better than it used to be. And we've got proper tuples. And now the F# people can thank the C# people because we've got proper struct tuples that don't cause allocations. Because one of the problems that F# has always had is that it creates all these wonderful things, but they don't really get to influence the underlying base class library so much. So you get a lot of allocating code. You get a lot of classes instead of structs. But yeah, so the lines between C# and well, these are my predictions for C#8. I think we just make the curly braces optional, make the semicolons optional, put in significant white space. We just need type providers, and yeah, we'll have a nice language. Got to throw him a bone. But no, there's C# is just brilliant, and these days, 2017, the Running Man. I found this out when I was making this slide deck. The Running Man, the movie, was actually set in 2017. So, with this ridiculous dystopian future where an authoritarian maniac had taken control of the United States of America. But, it's 2017, and a lot has happened in the last 17 years with Microsoft. Microsoft is now run by this dude with his little fist, but he looks like the baby doing the fist bump, doesn't he? But yeah, that's Satya, and now everything's kind of open. We've got .NET's running on Linux, and it's running on Mac, and it's running all over the place. We've got NuGet package manager. The first time I did this talk, I did a version of this talk a couple of years ago, and this slide said 50,000 packages and 500 million downloads. In the last 2 years, that's gone to 80,000 packages. It's 80,000 unique packages, not all the different versions of all the different packages, and 3 billion downloads from NuGet, which is quite impressive. I think people are still using .NET, in those far-off backward corners of the world. But more importantly than that, the entire thing is now open source, and it's on GitHub, and you can go and you can find the C# compiler, Roslyn, and you can submit issues and fixes and so forth. Anyone in the room had a pull request accepted on the Roslyn compiler? No? No, you usually get a hand up for that one. Or any of these, Core CLR, Core FX, any of the ASP.NET Core things? No, just me. I fix documentation. That's what I get my name on the contributors list, and all I've done is go, there's no apostrophe there, get rid of that. There's no A in exception. What are you doing? So yeah. But yeah, it's all there on GitHub, and everything. It's not just .NET, and so it's the entire ASP.NET Core. It's the C# compiler. It's also the editor. So VS Code is on GitHub, and it's not even, Microsoft in the old days used to go, we're doing open source. It's the MSPL license, which is our open source license. And the open source people went, no. Letting people look at your code is not open source. Now, it's all MIT licensed, or it's pretty much, there's a couple of bits that are Apache because they've got some patent things in there, and you have to do Apache if you've got patent things in there. But the vast majority of it is MIT licensed, which means you can just take the code and do whatever the hell you like with it, as long as you don't actually try and compete with Microsoft or something. There's like little end-user license agreements in there still. So you got that. And we've got ASP.NET Core, which is just brilliant. And if you've seen the stuff that's coming in ASP.NET Core 2.0, so for the web forms developers, there's Razor Pages, which is just someone in the team has gone, you know what, ASP.NET Core 1 is great, but it doesn't let people do bad things. It doesn't let them mix their markup and their logic code in the same file in the way that web forms used to. We should really fix that. We should let you put a functions section in CSHTML. So, yeah, thanks, whoever did that. But, you've got that. And then on the other side, the bit that I do like is the fact that you've got the controllerless method now. So it looks a lot like Express.js. You can just use ASP.NET routing, and you create a router, and then you say map get, map put, map post, map delete. And for microservices, this is brilliant. And it means it's a lot quicker at runtime than creating a controller and solving all the dependencies and everything else. You just have a function, takes a context, returns something back out, and you're done. So it's very nice and lightweight. And then you look at the stuff that they're doing for ASP.NET Core 2.1, and they've got amazing things happening to Kestrel. You've got all the pipeline stuff. You've got running over native sockets. You've got running on Windows RIO. This is one of the reasons why I'm not leaving .NET, is the people who are currently steaming .NET forward are just pathological about it. They love what they're doing, and they are obsessive about getting the best performance out of it. You know, in 2009, if you'd gone to people in Microsoft and said, why is ASP.NET like literally at the bottom of the Tech Empower benchmark, they would have gone, what's the Tech Empower benchmark? But now they got themselves up to 10th place on the Tech Empower benchmark, and then in round 14 they got knocked down a bit because like half a dozen new frameworks came out that were written in raw C++ or Rust or something and were faster. But they're determined to get back up there again, and they're kind of creating UTF-8 strings so that they can just read your HTTP header directly off the network card and pass it there, and then write the response directly back to the network card. And it's awesome. It's just this insane, passionate bunch of people trying to make the best, fastest, nicest framework that they possibly can in a language that we all know and enjoy using. And I think that's brilliant. I'm working on something on the side that there's some of the Tech Empower benchmarks are pulling data out of a database and serializing it to JSON. And when you do that at the moment in .NET, you basically go to the database and say, give me the thing back now, pull the data out of there into an object, and then use JSON.NET to serialize that object to bytes, and then send that back down the HTTP response, which is it's the .NET way of doing things, and it's fine, but it puts us quite a long way down on those benchmarks on Tech Empower. And so I'm wondering what happens if we get our SQL data reader and read the values of it and write them directly to the HTTP response as JSON without that intermediate step of creating an object and then serializing it back out again. So that's what I'm doing. Hopefully that's going to push us back up there again. So that could be fun. But ASP.NET Core, you can run it on Linux, and which is quite handy. I had an application, it's shut down now because it was tooling for Microsoft technology, and so of course they made their own version of it. What the hell is happening with my timer? That's okay. Sorry, my timer says, oh, it's because I stopped and did the demo and then restarted again. That's okay. Yes, sorry. I've got the PowerPoint presenters view, which is going, what is he talking about? Yes, I had an application that was running in every Azure data center in the world, and it was running on ASP.NET MVC and Web API, and it was running on Azure App Services, and it was costing me a bloody fortune to run it. And then I just migrated it over really easily to I think it was version 0.5 of ASP.NET 5, and started running it on Linux boxes in every data center in the world, and my hosting costs halved because Linux is free. And so, you know, and then add in the fact that you've gone from a framework that can serve like 10,000 requests a second to a framework that can serve 1 million requests a second, and you can probably shut down like 90% of your servers as well and still get the same performance. So that's good, that's nice. You can run it in Docker, so you can spin yourself up a Docker cluster in Kubernetes or Swarm or whatever else and create Docker containers. If you want to see a bit more about that, come to my next talk in room 5, Brave New .NET, where I'll be showing some of the stuff that you can do with all these new bits and pieces. I'm going to encourage you to do that, I think, by finishing this talk early, it looks like. We'll see. If you are, for a long time, I'm not anymore, because this is a brand new razor blade. Lovely. Oh, it's so nice. Which I bought because it can do, I can plug an Oculus Rift headset into it. I still haven't actually bought the Oculus Rift headset because I'm trying to work out how to explain that to my wife. I need it for work. You work for a bank. Okay. But yes, Until March this year, I was had this beat-up old laptop, and it really wouldn't run everything I needed it to run on Windows, so I was running Linux as my primary operating system, and I had Visual Studio Code, and it worked really nicely, and I had JetBrains Rider for a while as well. JetBrains Rider is coming along amazingly. It's really, really good. If you're doing web stuff, by the way, and I'm not getting paid to say this, but if you're doing web stuff, so if you're doing an application which is ASP.NET Core on the back end and Angular or React on the front end, then Rider is essentially like having Visual Studio with ReSharper and WebStorm all in one IDE. It's amazing. So yes, go and take a look on the stand outside. But yeah, VS Code's got IntelliSense and refactoring and everything else. And again, come to the bravenew.net. I'll show you a trick with the refactoring that you might not know about. That's all powered by OmniSharp, which you can also plug into Vim and Emacs and Atom if, for some reason, you want to use an Electron-based editor and you don't want it to be VS Code because you want something that's actually going to make your fans spin up because it makes you feel alive. I don't know. There are some weird people out there, but that's all powered by OmniSharp, which is open source and on GitHub, and you can contribute to that and borrow it and create your own version that works with your favorite text editor. It still supports Sublime, which I find just bizarre. But yes, we are basically living in the future at this point, and we can write C# code, we can pick up our C# skills, and we can go and use them absolutely anywhere. Thanks to Xamarin. And Xamarin Forms, and this is now bundled with Visual Studio. This is Microsoft own this, and so you can create applications for iPhones and iPads and Android phones and Android tablets and OS X and Windows 10 UWP and everything else using Xamarin Studio, Visual Studio for Mac as it's called now, and Visual Studio, and you can build. Write the application logic once. If you use Xamarin Forms, you can kind of get away with just writing your layout once if it's a fairly simple application. XAML Standard, which they're working on, is going to make it so that what Xamarin calls a label and what UWP calls a label and what WPF calls a label is all the same thing, instead of you having to remember that it's a label over here and a text span over here and a text block over here. So that's going to be awesome. But yeah, and you can even, it's only at the point where you actually need to publish the application into the Apple App Store now that you actually need a Mac to build your package to send to the App Store. With the new live coding stuff that they showed at Build, you can just have a Windows PC and be developing and debugging against a Mac, and it goes through some kind of weird live cloud build. I don't know what's going on there. It's witchcraft. But yes, you can, and so you can ship to all those different things because, Windows desktop stuff is becoming increasingly marginalized for most people. And then there's Unity 3D. Has anyone played with Unity at all? Yeah. So I was hoping to do a demo, but I couldn't get it to bloody work because I kind of suck. But at home, with my 11-year-old daughter, I am writing a game in Unity. It's kind of inspired by Doodle Jump. You're bouncing up a tower, basically. But yeah, and I'm teaching her C#, and she's going, Daddy, why is there a semicolon at the end of this line and not a semicolon at the end of that line? And I'm kind of going, oh yeah, that's not very intuitive, is it? Maybe we should use F#. No. But yeah, so Kerbal Space Program, which is this thing that's on the screen here, that was written in Unity. Stardew Valley, the kind of weird Harvest Moon farming game, that was written in Unity. There is a whole ton of games out there that were written in Unity with C#, and it's bonkers. And you kind of go edit this script, and Visual Studio 2015 pops up, and you're kind of editing, and then you can start it and step debug it and so forth, and the ball hits the thing and bounces, and I get a breakpoint, and the thing just freezes, and I'm kind of over on this screen over here going, why isn't my physics working? It's amazing, and it's C#, and it's just same thing that I'm using all day, and I can use it in the evening as well. And with Unity, I can write a game, and it can target Windows and Mac and Linux and Xbox One, Xbox One S, Xbox One X, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 4 Pro, the Switch. They're working on getting it running on the Switch. the tablets and so forth. I can create VR games to run in Oculus, Rift and Vive, and you can even target HoloLens. And HoloLens, you've also got just the fact that Microsoft with UWP, HoloLens is now just another one of the targets that you can create a Windows application for. So just out of the box, when you create a UWP application, one of the ways to publish it will be so that it's a big floating rectangle in the middle of space. And I mean, seriously, we are living in the future. This is amazing. There's a HoloLens out there. The InMeta stand have got a HoloLens, which I'm assuming they're not just showing to going, look, we've got this. No, you can't use it. So go and pretend to be interested in whatever it is they're selling and see if they'll let you have a go. Because I had a go on a HoloLens. It is bonkers. It is just, it's not the fact that the thing appears there, because you're kind of like, yeah, okay, that's fair enough. It's that when you move your head, the thing stays rock solid where it is. And, you know, at the moment, HoloLens is this kind of, it only works indoors, and it's quite a big, heavy thing and so forth. But in like 10, 15 years' time, if I'm back here again in another 17 years, right, I would be very surprised if we're still doing it in this way, because I'm just going to be able to put on something like a pair of Oakleys like you'd wear for cycling or running or something and get the full HoloLens experience. And I already know what application I'm going to write when that comes along. It's going to be, you go to Google Maps and you say, I'm going for a run, and you draw out your route that you're going to run, and then you go out and you start running, and it puts coins all the way along your route. And every kilometre, there's like a big coin or a big piece of fruit or something. And then I'm going to have in-app purchases so that Sonic the Hedgehog fans can change the coins to gold rings. And Pac-Man fans can change them just to like pill shapes. And when you turn around, there's 4 coloured ghosts chasing you. But yeah, this mixed reality thing is going to completely change. We're going to have, there'll be no monitors on desks, because you'll just put your thing on and it'll make it look like there's 3 massive monitors. So we've got that coming along. We've got the Internet of Things. You can take this Windows IoT Core now. Yeah, see what I did there? Yeah, it's clever. But yes, you've got Windows IoT Core, so you can take Windows and install it on a Raspberry Pi. I've got a Raspberry Pi at home that's running Windows, just so I can run iTunes on it, so that I can use it. It's an Apple TV basically. I've got iTunes installed here, and that's not on the Pi. That's on the Intel Edison board that I got, which is an x86 thing. 100 quid, really, really cheap. But yes, you can take your .NET Core code, the ahead of time compilation thing that I demonstrated with Core RT. You're going to be able to do that to create ARM binaries, and so then you'll be able to just take your tiny little thing and stick it on a Raspberry Pi Zero and attach it to rooms or whatever it is you do with the Internet of Things. I don't know. Create light bulbs that can be hacked by botnets and used to bring down the United Kingdom and make it look like we voted for Brexit. So, anyway, it's a Raspberry Pi. In summary then, over the last 17 years of .NET, I don't think anyone can deny that Microsoft have made a few mistakes. You know, they've cocked up a couple of times, which has made a bunch of people very happy, very unhappy, and has caused people to go, I'm leaving .NET forever. Shutting down Silverlight caused a whole mass exodus, going like, it's like browser plugins have become redundant and we don't need them anymore, so we're not going to make it. And a whole bunch of people went, but we liked browser plugins. And they all went off like that. And so, yes, and people have left and they've gone to Rails and they've gone to Node and all this sort of stuff. But there's a lot of people who are still now, you kind of go, oh, look, .NET has got this now. We've got .NET Core now. We've got cross-platform now. It's running on Linux now. And they're just people on Twitter kind of slagging you off and going, why are you still doing .NET? Why don't you just move on? Just .NET's on the scrap heap. It's not on the scrap heap, okay? .NET has had a difficult sort of teenage years, but it's just now getting into adulthood. It's just getting warmed up. And I think it is an amazing platform. I am going to continue to use it to build as many different things as I can think of, and I hope that I will be back here in 2030 with augmented reality so that my goggles can make you all look like cartoon characters from Looney Tunes, and talking about what we're going to be doing with .NET over the next 15 years. Thanks very much.